We
That's the punchline. Oh, great.
Now that was a genuine laugh, wasn't it, to start today's show?
Oh, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the Digital Download.
Rob, what is the Digital Download?
The longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live.
Marvelous.
Today on the Download, you don't need to be self-employed to be an entrepreneur. Anyone can be an intrapreneur. And we're going to talk about this with our special guest, Sean Adams. So despite the allure, the life of an entrepreneur is not always easy. At times, you are the chief cook and bottle washer. Generally, there's a lot of ambiguity with nobody telling you what to focus on or how even to get things done. Not everybody is cut out for that lifestyle. And that's okay. This week on the Digital Download, we're going to have a special guest. We're going to have Sean Adams on. Sean cut his teeth professionally as a business owner, spending the first 10 years of his career owning and operating several different service-based businesses. Now head of sales head of sales and partnerships at IORAD, Sean helps companies navigate the challenging world of technology by adopting technology adoption and training teams. Oh my dear God, you think I could write something that I could read?
There's
Sean,
no reason to make that assumption at all, is there? No reason
right.
at all.
Oh, I am so
Rob,
sorry.
I think you fluffed this.
Welcome to the Digital Download, everybody.
Are you trying to keep him from the dog or something?
Couple of things we're going to talk about today. Because Sean has a perspective from both sides of this wall, we're going to talk about things like why a personal brand is a modern day portfolio or resume. Why employees should view themselves more as franchisees. We're going to talk about non-asked outputs. What are they? And why are they career multipliers? And we're going to talk about how entrepreneurs can attract intrapreneurs. Here's a hint. It's all about autonomy. So with that said, I would like to bring Sean onto the show. Sean, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
Please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Sean, can you do a better job than Rob, please?
He can't do much worse.
Do a worse one.
Rob, this is how I know these guys are your friends, because they will not give you an inch here.
That's right.
I think you did a swell job overall. That was.
Oh, you're too kind, and literally too kind. Does that mean we're not friends because you're holding back?
No. I'm just trying to keep it professional here, at least now that we're recording.
Fair enough.
No, it's great to be here, guys. I really appreciate that.
So what do you do, Sean?
To get jumping in. Say that again, Tim.
What do you do, Sean?
Yeah, so I head up the sales and partnerships for IORAD. We're an interactive tutorial building software. So been here about 2 years and jumped in early on. We've been a bootstrapped kind of founder-led company for a better part of about 15 years. You've had Sandeep on the show a number of weeks ago, which was a really fun episode. I really enjoyed listening to that, and allowing him to share his story was cool. I joined about 2 years ago to kind of help build out a lot of the commercialized functions, bringing this to market with some of our larger customers, how to scale this. And one of the main go-to-market motions that arose through those exercises was partnerships. Other platforms that we integrate with actually resell us. And so we are bolted on to a lot of other technologies, primarily learning management systems, sales enablement hubs, content hubs, things like that. So primarily that's my job now, is figuring out where our customers are already investing in their tech stack. How can we help them better enable those places and sort of attach to their motions where their learners and their employees are.
Right.
So Sean, what led to the transition from entrepreneur to intrapreneur? And if you would, please explain what you mean by the term intrapreneur.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think that so first off, as you mentioned, I spent about the first 10 years of my career owning a couple of different service-based businesses and some construction, some real estate work. I did some consulting as well, and that world, as most people on this call know, is very daunting, very overwhelming. And I think that there's a disconnect with a kind of fetishizing that happens online with entrepreneurship and owning your own business. And there's this, I think, this allure, this gap where people are saying, hey, I'm an expert in this thing, or I have this skill set or this passion. Why don't I turn that into a business? And if you ever read the E-Myth or some of the other books out there, they talk about how, owning your own business is really a job. It's not the profession or your craft, right? When you're running a company, you're spending 30% on what you're actually good at, your passion, your craft. The majority of the time, running admin and people and finances and all of the minutia that keeps a whole organization afloat. And that's the piece that people just don't seem to talk about, and all the lows that come in with all of that. So I certainly experienced a lot of that. And I made a transition initially because I had an opportunity basically to sell some software back to the people I used to be. So I was a big proponent of ERPs and CRM systems, helping get them into small businesses. I saw how transformational software was going to be. This was right when the cloud was really starting to gain traction, 2009, 10, around that time frame. And I really wanted to focus all my energy on that. But as a consultant, I was getting drug in the mud with all the other things you need to do to run a business. And I had one of my partnerships at the time say, hey, listen, you used to be the customer that we solve and sell to now. Why don't you come do what you're good at, which is selling and talking to people and sharing stories and solving these problems? We'll take care of all the stuff you're not so good at and don't like doing, so you can focus on the stuff that you're really good at. And that shift happened for me. And I was very against it at first because I thought I was giving up ownership and, settling to go work for the man and all those sort of things. And I realized that I'm my own sort of freelance or franchisee within this larger organization. And that switch was everything for me because it really allowed me to just focus. And that's the main word that I think gets missed with, again, the allure around all entrepreneurship.
There's actually an interesting TED Talk that touches on that similar topic. I love the title of it. It's Ernesto Ceroli's Shut Up and Listen. And in it, he says to be an entrepreneur, you need to do three things. And he's never discovered in his 20 some odd years of working with entrepreneurs, one person that could do all three things well. You need to make the product, you need to market the product, and you need to manage the money. And the TED Talk goes on to say so many other things, and I love it for all of those reasons. But when you were talking about, 30% of your time as an entrepreneur is doing that stuff you love, that really resonated with me and reminded me of that particular video.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I roll out from time to time, that stat, because I think I read the story comes from the E-Myth Revisited about the woman that's the baker, and she spends 75% of her time baking bread, and she thinks, oh, if I run my own business, it'd be great. I can do 100% of my time baking bread. And then she realizes, as you said, Sean, that she doesn't. She spends 30% of her time baking bread and the rest of her time doing stuff she hates. And it is really interesting, isn't it? Although there is that other side of that. You said about kind of the giving up control thing. And I think that at least when you're running your own business, although you do have to do some things that you don't get enjoyment from, or you're not naturally good at, you do have control of your own destiny in a way that you don't when you work for somebody else. And for many of us that run our own business, that's really important. It's really important that we can steer the direction of stuff. Tim and I are very aligned on where we're going, how we're going to get there, what the business stands for, what the objectives are, what we consider to be right and wrong. And the problem is that when you're working for somebody else, you're dancing to their tune and not your own. And, sometimes that doesn't matter because you happen to be aligned with them. And sometimes it does matter. I remember working at one particular company where I was very keen that we should help clients implement some of the stuff that they were buying from us. And I was told, no, that's not what we do. What we do is sell licenses. And actually, I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah. I mean, the word used there is alignment, right? And I think that people blur the lines and they say, well, it's either I work for someone where I'm not going to be aligned or I work for myself. And it's like, there are so many really terrible places to work that you shouldn't work at. Like, I think aligning your mission and your passion and finding your purpose is every bit as important as the place you go choose to work for, right? Are you actually passionate about the problems you're solving? And is the management team and the structure and the culture aligned with those same initiatives, right? And most people are misaligned there. So their alternative to solve for that is, oh, I'm going to go start my own business. And my point is just pause for a moment and do your due diligence to see if there's a better fit elsewhere before you jump into a world that's likely not what you think it is. Not that no one should work for themselves, but I think a very, very small percentage of people are actually cut out for true entrepreneurship versus like, a freelancer or someone doing project-based work, a consultancy, something like that, where you're basically, gun for hire for a very specific skill set. Like, that's a little different. I'm talking about when you're standing up an organization with employees and scale and these sort of things. That's always my call out, is like, just because the current experience is not living up to aligning to your passion where you're working doesn't mean there aren't other places. There might not be, but there could be. And do your due diligence to check that first before you just go, you know what, screw all employment. I'm just going to jump into the deep end here. And I find a lot of people, especially in times like this, where, the employment is difficult and there's not a lot of hiring going on. So people are jumping in. And I mean, I've, spun my wheels for years trying to figure that out. And I just want to make sure people are figuring out ways to see all the options out there so that they don't go backwards in pursuit of something that they don't fully grasp.
Yeah.
I do think it's really important, though, that there's a big distinction between running your own business and being an entrepreneur. And I've in all of my years in the working world, I think I've only met a handful of people that are entrepreneurs. We have one of them on here as a guest, Scott Russell. He'd had a successful business that he'd sold, and another successful business that he sold, and then completely different successful business that he hasn't sold yet. But he's grown them from nothing to many tens or hundreds of millions of pounds worth of revenue. And our chairman, who is also our accountant, he said about the thing about an entrepreneur is the reason they need an accountant is that the accountant runs along behind them, sweeping up after them to keep them out of jail. And it's kind of like that. Sometimes you see those people that they see profit. And I don't mean in a nasty way, but they see profit in opportunities. The gap between buying and selling these things. Those things are just a commodity. It could be coffee, it could be oil, it could be houses, whatever. And they pounce on that because it's the thrill of the chase for them as much as anything else. But many business owners.
I think it's a great story that Scott told, which just backing what you're saying, which is that Scott set up he sold a company. He was having a cup of coffee, and as he was having a cup of coffee, he realised that maybe he could do this better. And then when he was set up his coffee business, he was actually so how much do fair trade? So how much do farmers actually get? And found out they hardly got anything. So he went to Africa. And found a farmer and said, "Can you grow coffee beans for us?" He said, "Yeah." And now Scott could have bought the farm, but he didn't. What he's done is he's actually provided a trust to allow that farmer and other farmers to actually grow the coffee beans, and they get more money. Now he could have just sat at home but he didn't. What he's trying to do is he's actually trying to make the world a better place. And that's kind of his values, and that's what he's done in terms of trying to see things differently, and used his skill as an entrepreneur to make things different for people.
Yeah, and I think that vision, it can be really inspirational. But I mean, oftentimes I see business owners that have no entrepreneurial flair whatsoever, and they are executing on a process, and they may be doing it very profitably or not very profitably, kind of isn't the issue, but they haven't conjured anything up. They haven't seen an opportunity. They've just gone, okay, well, I'll just do that because that's what I know. And it kind of, I think often people potentially go into business for multiple reasons, don't they? And, it could be because you have a passion and no one's able to support you in that. So, I'm going to do it myself. Or it could equally be, I'm unemployable. Let's be honest, most of us are unemployable these days, but that's for an entirely different reason. It's because we choose to be. But often, people do it because it's a safety net. I got made redundant in this job. I got made redundant in this job. Got made redundant. Actually, I'm going to take control of my future and start my own business because at least if it's my business, I'm not going to be made redundant.
Adam, I think you have too high a bar to measure entrepreneurship. Mark's story is great, but if I have to aspire to be Mark, creating multiple several $100 million businesses, I am never going to be an entrepreneur. I might as well just go work for somebody else because that's all I'm going to amount to. But I don't think it's that trivial or that hard to attain, the spirit of entrepreneurship. But how does one do that within an organization? Or Sean, back to you. Why should employees view themselves as franchisees?
Yeah, I would say more about the doubling down on the strengths and, that alignment of what we like to do, what we naturally gravitate towards, and what we actually are good at. And they tend to all be self-serving and feed each other. And at least for me, it was the reality of like, where's an environment in which I can be in the 1% of my field? Where can I thrive? Where do I have autonomy, right? I have like a checklist of best practices of things I'm looking for. Is there an environment that can allow me to hyper focus on those things? And on the entrepreneur side, it was like, okay, well, where are there gaps? Where is my unique experience actually a massive advantage to another organization? So in the IRAD example, being very product focused, they had no sort of sales presence, no kind of account management, none of that side of the business. And so it almost became like, all right, well, we need to build a department from the ground up. We need a strategy. We don't just need someone to plug in this box. This is a startup world. It's very different than going and working in corporate America, right? There is no rule book. There's no systems and processes, right? Like I'm building all of that from the ground up.
You're creating the rules though, aren't you, Sean?
Exactly. And that's why it's intrapreneurial, right? I feel like I have a structure around me, an infrastructure, but I can build within the 15 to 17 years plus that Sandeep has built this structure, right? And the ability to say, okay, well, here is my lane that I know that you can't solve and I can't do what you're doing, God knows. So like, why can't we partner together in this arrangement in which I can focus on this component? And that is very much more of a partnership and this entrepreneurial spirit where I don't go to our management team and say, hey, I have 100 questions on what I need to do next. It's either like, I screwed these 3 things up. How do you think we should do the next part? Or I'm thinking about doing this. How does that align with what you're thinking, right? And it's this sort of like group and joint decision-making that I think a lot of organizations actually want, but they don't do a very good job of attracting for those sort of things. And I think that the employees, not everyone's cut out for that level of autonomy and that level of most people want to be worker bees, and that's perfectly okay. But the people that want to be entrepreneurs, that's why I'm saying there's another opportunity in a lot of organizations to build and take ownership, but it has to be within a smaller structure. And you have to recognize what those opportunities are. And oftentimes you have to bring them up and suggest and showcase what those things could look like to kind of try before you buy for an entrepreneur who would maybe want to hire you and partner with you in that space.
Yeah. Alex, do you have a question?
Oh, it's gone now. No, I do. listening to you talk about entrepreneur versus intrapreneur really resonates with me, Sean. I felt I was at my happiest in the corporate world when I had more autonomy to do the things that I wanted to do. But what you describe, so when I left the corporate world in 2020, I tried to rejoin it. And what I found was every conversation I had, every interview that I did, I was, someone was trying to fit me into their box. And I didn't feel I quite fitted into their box. And I struggled with it. And I, felt like I wasn't progressing. I felt like, well, I don't want to just do something because, I need to do and say and be the person they want me to be, because I won't be happy and I won't perform. So I, in one sense, I wasn't successful in finding a job then. And so what did I do? I set up my own company and I've been going for nearly 3 years now, touch wood. But it's difficult to find that intrapreneur role. What advice can you give to people out there that might be thinking about this now in a super competitive market? There's so many candidates available, and seems the good jobs are going to the best people.
Well, first off, I would say choose your hard. Everything is difficult. I don't care what lane you pick. You start your own business. It's no easier than going and finding the right job, right? So it's not getting easier. It's getting comfortable with the hard that you choose. So I think that would be piece one. The other one would be the caliber or the category of company you're looking for. So I tend to gravitate towards more of the startup world because they need help with literally everything and they're very under-resourced. So I can make a big impact quicker, and they truly need people to help guide the direction. I didn't do very well in larger corporate organizations. I worked for a couple of those that were venture backed and structured. And to your point, Alex, in this box, I need you to do these tasks. That wasn't a very good fit for me. That's a great fit for a lot of people. But I think in this personality type or this sort of the passions that someone in this role would like, looking towards more of a startup or a growth company or someone who or some organization in that role that is trying to scale their org, they're just inherently going to have these challenges. And if you're working in a company with less than a couple hundred employees, their hair's on fire trying to do all these different things and stand up different programs and see what sticks and what's going to work. They're actually looking for input often. Again, it's not going to be every company out there, but one of the ones that I would look for are those that are maybe not posting, but you care about. Like, what if you look at it, let's say software, for example, what's the tools that you're already using? What are the companies that you support and love? What are the reasons for that? Like, can you start as a customer and an end user first? Because you are the proven case study as to why there's value there. What is it you like about that? And is there anything within your skill set that can help you sort of evangelize that product or that organization? Right? Like that's with IORAD, with the other companies I worked on, I was basically an end user, a customer first. And it was like, I'm going to be telling people about this, whether you pay me or not. So we could either align and I can help scale that message and have a microphone or a megaphone to do so. Or I can keep in my corner and try to like throw a couple leads over the fence every now and then. Right. And so that type of looking for the right fit it's a journey that is worth taking the time on, but it's not going to be something you're just submitting CVs and resumes and hoping for the best. Like you're having to get really creative. I'm happy to share some of the ways people are breaking in, but that would be the mindset piece I would say first.
Yeah. So how do you screen for those kinds of opportunities? I've never seen a LinkedIn job posting saying, we're looking for an intrapreneur.
Yeah. You will see some now because they're trying to attract like certain types of, I think it's like a go-getter type of personality, but I think it's kind of abusing the concept a little bit. But I'm not one for anything advertised. I think that's just asking for bloodied water, right? I mean, like if they're looking for that role and they're listing those bullets, to Alex's point, that you're either going to be able to fit those bullets or you're not, right? And so I think that I think it's more important to look for the brands that you care about and recognizing the problem. Like I look at searching for a job like I look at landing a top customer, the top account. I am prospecting, building research, figuring out insights, reading reports on them, connecting with their counterparts, figuring out their org structure, listening to their customers, watching them on webinars, listening to the employees talk on podcasts. I'm trying to learn as much as I can about that organization. By doing so, I'm recognizing the gap. What I'm selling at that point is not my product or service. It happens to be me and my employment or my specialty, my skill set. It's the exact same thing. So it's, kind of like ICP, right? So what is your ideal, kind of company profile? And then what is it that where are the gaps to where you can actually add value to, right? And for the IRAD example, there wasn't a sales team. You need a very specific person to do the work that I'm doing here, right? This is not for everyone, but I couldn't do anything else. Like, this is how I have to function. So it took a while to figure that out. And I got this job not from a job posting, right? Sundeep and I just connected, started talking, and that's how this happened. So I think there's a I think it's an organic approach that needs to be taken in, and you have to look at things differently. Otherwise, you're just going to be a number in a larger list.
If I'm hearing you correctly, it's not about hitting the easy apply button.
It is not.
Is there something, we had your CEO on here, and he comes across as a fantastic guy. And I just wondered, is there something in the culture that you need to be looking for as well? Because I totally agree with you about finding the job, but part of that then is about going to the interviews and asking the right questions. So what should we be asking for or looking for in terms of culture within an organization?
Yeah, it's going to have to align with what your particular personality is going to look for. So I'll just use myself in this example. I view myself as an intrapreneur, right? So that means that I am looking for a place where I can own a part of this success and growth. I have ideas, I'm opinionated, I have processes and things that I care about that I'm going to bring into this organization. They're not going to be a fit for most. I'm asking questions about, like, what does the existing structure look like? What has worked and hasn't worked before? What did you try right before this, right? Like, why are you interested in this? What are you interested in me? And more importantly, what is the working relationship going to look like, right? So the biggest thing with Sundeep, besides his ability to kind of captivate with his stories and all the other things that he has going on for him, there was just this level of autonomy where he was looking for my advice and buy-in for things. It was like, I'm not an expert in this business development role, but I have 17 years building this product and solving this problem. I know that piece super well, and I know my role, but I need to grab team members that can own other components, but give a shit about it, right? Like, they're not just trying to show up and wait and go, so what would you like me to do this week, right? Yeah. There's none of that. It's an autonomous relationship where it's a check-in and that working portion. So my questions were all around feedback loop, timeline, how do you measure success? What metrics do you actually track, right? And like, from his answers, I could understand that, like, it was gonna be easy to make impact because there wasn't a great measurement tool around that. And I could impact that quickly through the way in which I could see.
Did you ask about whether you could make mistakes and fail?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. I mean, he talks about the concept of a proof of concept, and everything is a test, right? He comes from the product world where you're just standing up a feature, getting feedback, testing, iterating, changing, deciding if you're going to keep it or not. And he takes that as like a lifestyle, right? So like, nothing is a strategic corporate decision. It's very much like, we're going to try a bunch of crap, see what's starting to gain traction, what we're getting good positive feedback on. We're going to screw up a lot of stuff in that process, and that's perfectly okay. And that environment for testing and trying was again, like a major piece of the pie for me, because to the other points here, it wasn't going to make me feel misaligned with the mission. Just because they decided, they woke up one morning and the board said, we're now focusing on AI. Maybe I don't care about AI, but just because they do, now my whole world changes, right? That's kind of an unfair arrangement versus, let's enter into solving the customer problem. Maybe AI is a part of that. Great. Now we can work towards that North Star together, but it's not just a top-down initiative that kind of squashes me. And that's a huge piece, at least from my own perspective.
Because I was once given some advice: never go and work for a company where the founders are still involved, because the founders will they'll go off and have a meeting one evening and then change the strategy or something like that. but you seem to be working in a founder-based organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an exception for every rule. The leveling playing field for me was the autonomy. Like I didn't think that there was going to be a rug pulled out from under me because there was no competition in this department. It wasn't like, well, let me go sell this deal. Let me go set up this partnership. It was like, I don't want to do anything in that department. Like you wanted nothing to do with how that ran. And so I felt pretty confident that that there wasn't going to be an overnight switch that was going to happen out of nowhere. Again, there's nothing guaranteeing any of that, but that's why it's worth doing the due diligence to ask those questions, to look past over the past couple of years. Like, tell me about some of these other initiatives or hires you've made and how they've worked or haven't worked. And then speaking to those individuals. Like one of the number one things I tell, if you're applying for jobs is like, do not talk to the people that work there. Like that's one part that's like table stakes, right? Don't put all your energy in that. Go on LinkedIn, hit the filter that says that company previously worked at that org, and then reach out to as many people there as you can and ask about their unbiased opinion, right? What was it like? Why did you leave? That gold will tell you everything you need to know about like, oh my gosh, yeah, the CEO would come in and he had too much to drink that night and he came in and changed 3 things in the company, and then so like all that kind of stuff you can pick up through the people that actually work there, because you're not going to get that advice from the people still there, but you will from the kind of previous roles.
So I heard you talk about what do you want me to do this week, boss? And I think that kind of alludes to with the question of non-asked outputs. Tell us more about your belief around non-asked outputs, what specifically you mean by that, and why you believe they're career multipliers.
Yeah, so this is something I've believed in for a bit, and Sandeep actually coined the concept, and we were talking in a session, and he kind of brought his perspective on the non-asked outputs. The idea being, what are the things that I can show versus tell? I'm in a client call, I'm in a potential partnership, I'm working with a customer, I'm trying to apply for a job. There's this piece where the counterpart is going, man, I hope they are what they say they are, right? And you don't know. You're taking a leap of faith that person is going to do what they allegedly have done before or what they're saying they're going to do in the future. And that's a big gap for a lot of organizations to bet on in any way. And so the concept is like, where as the person trying to build trust, can you show value, don't tell? So some examples of this would be just working with a potential partner, and we were kind of stuck on a few elements that were out of our control. They weren't moving forward with the partnership. And I felt like maybe they didn't trust us yet. There wasn't that feel. And so I'm like, all right, well, what would be something that would wow them, that would be helpful, that would kind of prove that we're going to be a good partner and a good resource, instead of me just telling them, yeah, we'll solve all your problems. We're going to be your people, right? And so one of the things they kept coming up is they didn't have a VP of sales. They were really struggling with this hire. Someone had left, a big gap in the organization. It doesn't really impact the partnership. I mean, it does indirectly, but I had a couple of contacts and a few people that I knew, and I'm like, I'm just going to go, sat down with these people that I knew, and I connected them to this potential partner. I said, hey, listen, they'd be a great fit for you. They have these skill sets. Here's what I would suggest. Here's how they can help. And I made the introduction for them, right? That's not like an enormous lift from an energy level for me, but think about the impact for the recipient of that. I didn't go and just sit there, hey, just checking in, just following up, just seeing if you're going to give me more money yet, right? I'm just like, hey, you mentioned a problem. By the way, here's a connection. No pressure, right? You don't have to take this person. But that reach of showing that I'm just going to be connecting dots and be resourceful is super powerful, right? So it's that non-asked. That's not something someone's going to ask you to do, but you're willing to put the time in and showcase that resource. I've got a number of other examples about that, but it's all about like standing up a proof of concept, an example, doing what you think might be the right answer. Even if it's not, even if it's wildly incorrect and you screw up, it's the reach, the effort of doing the action that is actually valued, not even the output sometimes, or the like end goal. It's the actual doing of the task, the action itself.
So
actually,
here's a question for you. So you decided to go and work at IRAD. So, and this is kind of a little bit tongue in cheek because we are a fun loving bunch and we're in this social space. So why did you decide to do that rather than pursue your dream of whiskey and golf? So clearly, I'm saying that because of the backdrop that you have. But what the world needs is more driving ranges with whiskey bars attached.
My thoughts exactly. The reality of the situation is it's going to take me 5 years to afford the whiskey and golf range, so I have to make more money at IORAD to support that long.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because the entrepreneurial spirit in all of us, we kind of have this dream, and we've all read the E-Myth, and the idea that this thing that I'm doing for pleasure can become my main source of income. And a lot of the problem is, so I was originally a violinist, and the problem with that is that you take something which is a joyous experience and turn it into working in a factory, because you end up playing the same pieces again and again and again. And I think that for a lot of people, they fail to make that kind of that jump, that recognition that this thing that I love doing, flower arranging or cookery or car racing or whatever it is, and they think that everyone in the world shares their passion for it, which I think we've probably all learned along the way that that's not normally the case, but also the fact that it can rob the joy of doing those things. So how have you maintained the joy? Because clearly you were an advocate for IORAD before you joined. So how have you kept it as something that you can be passionate about rather than something which has just become your 9 to 5?
Yeah. So one of my passions when I was running a consultancy, I'd sold a couple of service businesses. I got out of that world. I was doing consulting, helping small organizations set up software, get in the cloud, start using technology. And it was really seeing great results with allowing them to all the benefits of efficiency and all those sort of things. But it was such a big lift because one, I couldn't find good software all the time that filled those needs. Then I had to build all the training, do the implementation, do the ongoing support. It was just trying to do 20 different jobs that took away from the actual showcasing and selling and educating the concepts to people, which is what I actually like to do. I actually even spent some time trying to stand up a product that was similar to IORAD at one point, way back, like a documentation tool before I even knew any of these things existed. And it was just so daunting because I was going to spend a sliver of my time actually doing what I cared about. And then I naturally gravitated towards, and all of my time in product meetings and all these things that I was terrible at and really did not enjoy. And so the shift for me was really realizing that, like, if I were to join IORAD, I'm able to hone in on just those other things. I'm not doing product calls. I'm not making decisions about where a button's going to be on a screen or marketing collateral or all these other things. I'm actually focusing on the things I'm good at. And so the craft for me is having conversations, enlightening people about documentation, the power of training, the power of technology. And I get to do that every single day. So I don't get tired of the thing that I feel like I was born to be able to do. And now I get an environment to do that 75% of my time. Right. And that's the difference. And this happens all the time in corporate America where you get rewarded, and what you get rewarded with takes you away from what actually gave you the success. If I'm a really good seller and I start moving my way up the corporate ladder, there's a point where management goes, I'm going to put you as a VP of sales or a sales manager. Going from spending all of your time, what you're really good at, making a lot of money, to 10% of your time selling, 80% and 90% of your time in spreadsheets and comp reviews and all this other stuff. That's not actually your core work that you get enjoyment out of, but it was just this weird ladder that took you there. Right. And so it's just incentivizing the wrong behaviors. And so that was really it for me, is a recognition of how do I stay in the arena that I thrive, that I like to do, and I can be in an organization to help support all the things that I don't do and I don't like to do.
That's quite a rarity, isn't it, these days? Because that ladder that you spoke about is you see it prevalent, particularly in sales, but I suspect in most areas of business. That ladder is so well documented and entrenched in corporate life that I'll take you away from the thing that you do and put you into a role that requires none of the skills you've honed, and loads of skills that are often, in the case of sales management, are often totally at odds with the skills that you've learned previously.
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for why that happens other than just tenure and them just trusting that person more. But yeah, that's always been a big gap and a problem for me. And I think it's very similar to what people feel in entrepreneurship and the trap of getting into the management side and financials and all those things that weren't really your craft.
Mm.
So Sean, what's the future?
The future of IORAD, the future for myself,
The future for yourself and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have goals and visions for where I wanted to take my career, but more importantly, with the alignment of IORAD, right? So it's important for me, like we have an obscurity issue, personally, me and the company, meaning people just don't know who we are, right?
Yeah.
When someone meets us and sees the product and we have a conversation, like 8 out of 10 times, it's moving towards a positive, either a customer or a partnership in some way, right? And so that just tells me we need to have more of those going on. And if we're just serving people correctly, spreading the word, building a brand, solving problems, putting outputs there that people didn't know to ask for, we're growing that in the right direction. And it's getting us to not just the financial goals that we have, but impacting more lives, right? And that's really our goal. And my goal in the next 5 years is we want IORAD in all of these tools, all of these places where employees are struggling right now to share how they do what they do. And that's a big mission for me, is to kind of eradicate people from all the inefficiency they're dealing with their training. And that's also, a big mission of the company. So that's why that alignment, I think, works. And there's a whole bunch of pieces that go into that. But the future for us is just pursuing that mission and spreading that to as many people and organizations as we can.
So how are you going to do that? Because I we talk to a lot of companies, and many of the companies have got good products. And many of the companies, when they get to the point when they're having a conversation with a prospect, I say a prospect, that makes it sound like they're processizing their recruitment of clients. And I don't mean it in that way, but with somebody that is a likely candidate to buy their product and it's a really good fit for them, they get a very high strike rate of that moving on down the conversation. But the challenge that they have is getting those initial conversations on the basis that people will trust. So we've seen it in the comments here. People start to join a conversation and then immediately they pitch slap, don't they?
Yeah.
And you see it with the emails. I wrote a rant about that just yesterday on LinkedIn. It's this whole kind of templated, I'll just bounce this to the top of your inbox kind of verbiage that we see 100 times a day from people. So how are you going to do that? Because yes, you want to scale. Yes, you want to put the word out there. Yes, you want to put yourself in front of as many people because you know that you've got a solution that solves a lot of problems. But that's the limiting factor, isn't it? So what are you going to do that's going to help you achieve that?
It goes back to the show versus tell, right? Every salesperson is doing that in the comments, in emails, everywhere else. Let me tell you. No value exchange, just what I could do for you, what I might be able to help with. And that's great, but how can we showcase value and build more trust up front? So some of the ways we're doing this is really trying to anticipate needs. So for example, we have a tutorial building tool, which means we have hundreds of thousands of tutorials that are public that we can utilize from our customer base on how to do different things in technology. It's actually a really big useful resource for a lot of organizations. And we're on LinkedIn, we're in our prospect calls, in our communities, in our partnerships, in different ecosystems. And we're just providing free tutorials. We're saying, hey, I noticed you dropped a comment asking questions about HubSpot. We have a free library of all those tutorials here, and we're just putting them there. No ask, no call to action, nothing. We are just planting seeds as we go with resources, with tutorials, with connections. We are helping people find jobs. We are exploding our network on LinkedIn to try to make connections with people, support their content, understand the dialogues that are happening out there. And that is just deposit after deposit after deposit. And every week there's 1 or 2 or 3 people that are saying, hey, I saw that thing, or this was a cool connection, or I saw your LinkedIn post where you told me how to do this. I noticed you don't have a website selling a course. Like, no, I don't. It's not designed for me to monetize this idea or this video. The idea is for the long-term benefit for you to understand how we can impact the organization. And to do that, I got to give away some shit for free. You have to actually help people solve some stuff and show the value. Don't just tell them that they're going to get value after they give you money.
Yeah, Sean, I think I've heard you allude to networking a couple of times now. You've said that the job that you landed with IORAD was not a job that was posted. The obscurity issue that you're dealing with, and you have a strong personal brand online, and I think it's more than just whiskey and golf. Tell us a little bit more about why a personal brand is the modern day portfolio, why it's so important, and maybe if you're inclined, how can someone get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think that LinkedIn's the perfect example for this. I'm using sales in these examples because it's my world and what's easy to comprehend. But if I'm looking to hire someone, for example, as a salesperson, and again, I'm just looking at their resume, or I'm just talking to a previous employer, I'm just thinking about what they're telling me they might do. I don't really have any value I can see. There's nothing tangible. Well, what if there was like videos and connections and comments and a podcast they were interviewed on, and other communities that I see them constantly adding values? I hear how they think. I see how they write. I actually see them on video. Like, you instantly build rapport. Like, I've never met any of you, but we will leave this conversation feeling like we kind of sort of know each other, simply because you could see my face and we could hear each other talk. Like, that's the only way you get to know someone. And I look this much more credible just because I was on this podcast. Even though I could have said a bunch of nonsense that wasn't actually
not on this podcast, you don't believe me.
Well, he might look credible.
So this alone, you start to position yourself as a thought leader or someone who has an opinion that's worth listening to. And it's such a powerful portfolio builder when someone can log on and go, oh, you've got a presence here. You're posting stuff. You're putting yourself out there. You're sharing your thoughts. Like, it's not about having tens of thousands of followers or some post that goes viral, right? If you helped one person or one future employer or one coworker or partner solve a problem or just think differently about a concept, like, what's more powerful than that? You're showing value that they get to literally experience through your content or through connections you've made or through you supporting someone else's content on LinkedIn. So the personal brand for me it's like job proofing yourself, right? Like, if you do it correctly, people will be asking you for jobs and you're going to get recruited versus having to go search out there. Because we're going to go, yeah, this guy's putting this stuff up there. And, unfortunately I have to see his face all the time on my feed, but you feel kind of like you know him. And it's a reminder that they're out there, even if it's not all this perfectly polished stuff that people think it needs to be. It's that awareness play. And what's more important than that, right? Like, it's helping you solidify your expertise as a viable business owner or employee. And more importantly, it's helping elevate the brand too. IORAD gets a massive impact from me putting the work in that I do to build a personal brand. And every one of those connections that I make benefits from that. And then the company benefits from it.
But there's a lot of people out there saying that they don't have anything to say, or no one would be interested in them. So how do those people take that leap?
If you have a job or have ever had a job, then you have something to say. Otherwise, why would they hire you, right? You're just not publicly disclosing the information that's expertise in your head. And the exercise of getting over the fear of getting on camera or writing a couple of things down, that's the only thing you need to overcome. It's not the thoughts, because you have thoughts. If you get into a one-on-one scenario with a future employer or a coworker or something, like, you've got ideas, you've got perspectives, you have concepts and frameworks that you work on. You might not have like an unlimited amount of those, but you have some, and there's a baseline there. What are the things you care about? What would you tell your network about? Like, what would you be talking about at the water cooler or elsewhere? And on top of that, work with other people in your feed and in your network, because that's the biggest and best area to generate ideas. Most people look at a blank screen, they go, oh my God, there's no way I could write anything captivating, right? That's a very overwhelming experience. If you start scrolling through LinkedIn and you see somebody put a thing up there and you're like, well, I don't agree with that. I've had a totally different experience. And then you start writing a comment, there's one of your posts, right? That's an idea that you had based on context from something else. Or maybe you really agree with something. Can you repurpose that content, give that person a shout out? Hey, I was listening to Tim Hughes. He mentioned this concept. I thought it was really interesting. I've had a similar experience. This is how that's went. There's a post. right?
But that all takes time, Sean. And how how have you got to the point where you've kind of linked doing that with the commercial value that it brings to you and your business?
It's priorities, like everything else. I've got a system, right? So in an hour per day, I put all of my LinkedIn time every morning where I'm engaging, connecting, commenting, posting. And I have all that systemized. It's taken me 5 years at this point to kind of refine it down to that daily activity. And then every Monday, I don't do any meetings and I do all of my content creation. So I have ideas that I stack up on a list every day when I'm having conversations, good comments, I tag them and copy paste them. And every Monday I sit down, I'll make some videos, I'll write some posts out, and I'll kind of polish a few things and schedule everything for the rest of the week. And then every work day for 30 minutes or an hour, I can just go through and do that engagement. So it's a system that I was able to refine down. It's not overly complicated, but it's a priority because I've seen the impact of it. And even though there isn't like measurable results, I posted this thing and my income went up by this much. That's not a thing you're going to be able to do. If you can, let me know, because I want to know what that post is.
Well, we can actually, but that's a conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that one of the biggest challenges that we see in people is that they want to get immediate results. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to get immediate results. You post something, it gets seen by somebody, you happen to be in the right place at the right time, and they phone you up and say, I saw that post you did, that's interesting, we need to talk about that. It happens. It happens a surprisingly, large number of times. But the reality is that's luck. And, we always say we're not in the business of luck, we're in the business of process. And one of the things that's really interesting about what you said is that you have got your process and you built your machine and you crank the handle on the machine and you know what's coming out at the other end, which is engagement. And one of the things that we see, and the reason that, one of the things that we're very proud of is that if you map the most influential people in the world for social selling and digital selling, it's basically everyone in our business. We are all of the top 10 people for digital selling in terms of influential people. And the reason that we have that position is because there's a relentlessness to what we do. We publish today and tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after, and we just keep it going. And every now and again, what happens is there's a new entrant in the marketplace, and they come in, and we see them kind of start to creep up and then they peak, and then they start to drop away again because they can maintain it for a week or 3 weeks or 3 months, but ultimately they can't maintain it indefinitely. And the reason that they can't is not because they haven't got the wherewithal to do that, but because they're still seeing this as being a journey with a destination rather than a lifestyle change. I do all of my prospecting on social media. I never send a sales email, ever. I never make a sales call, cold call, ever. I never go to an event with an expectation of selling something, ever. And the reason I don't, because social provides scale for me to be able to do those things. So at the point that you and I have a conversation or a Zoom call, it's not a speculative thing. We've already had some interaction, and we're seeing about whether or not there's any synergy there, and we can move it forward. And I think that it's beautiful to hear that you've kind of got to this place where you're like, okay, I've got my niche, my time carved out for this. I know every day, and it's lovely to hear you say, part of what you do every day is engaging with people. Because I expect you to engage with my content, but I'm way too busy to engage with yours. Actually, that's not how the world works. And there's this delusional behavior in so many people that is, your product is of no interest to me, but my product, that's going to be really interesting to you. Why would I care anymore? The only reason anyone's passionate about their product is because it pays their mortgage.
Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, that's absolutely been my experience, and I don't track it I don't know that if I put in this many hours, I'm going to get this many leads. It is different. I don't always know that output. And to your point, you cannot control that output. But to me, the only thing that I care about is the input. What are the things in my control? And I am constantly trying to refine my week down to those activities that give me the highest leverage for putting me in a position to have more luck. And for me, it's those inputs on LinkedIn. I don't really even think about, did it get 500 views or 1,500 or what? I don't even think about that. It's just that the activity is the win. The action of doing the thing, clicking the button and putting the thought in was the win. What comes after that, you literally cannot make a person talk to you or anything else. That impact is everything. And the last piece I would say is from a, not just a sales perspective, but just a broad level ability to convey ideas. I think one of the main reasons I've been able to scale up in my professional career has been to write and to speak on video, because it forces you to crystallize thoughts into some sort of logical pattern that other people can understand.
Beautiful.
And even if you're not in a customer facing role, the ability to take all this nonsense that's in your head that you don't always have a good sounding board for and throw it on a piece of paper or on a post. And even if one person engages with it or no one engages, the activity of distilling, making sense of something and putting it into a narrative is really, really good for just general professional development. Again, even if it doesn't land you a job or anything else.
Sometimes you can even screw up on video, live video, and you survive.
But we would never do that, obviously.
No.
Rob, could you put up Adam's comment for us, please? Because I think there's some really good points in there about. He says, absolutely and totally agree, Sean. Not always being about the high numbers of connections that you have, but more about the diversity and the quality of your network, to have a laser focused reach with your digital footprint. I mean, I think that's really good advice, Adam, in terms of having a wide and varied network. High number of followers may only mean influence, but no deep chops through leadership that mean more with substance. Thanks, Adam. Yeah.
One of my metrics internally is I call it like the cell phone rule, right? It's like you have 12,000 followers on LinkedIn, whatever. That literally means nothing. It's how many of those people do you have their cell phone number? Or if you were to cold call them because you had a quick question, they would be like, oh yeah, hey man, what's up? What's going on? How are you doing? Right? And like that to me is the real metric. How did you turn a connection into an offline or a personal friendship of some kind, or just an acquaintance in that way? Most people do not do that because they're thinking through that transactional lens. But to your point, it doesn't mean volume. It just means quality. And like, could you assemble a team of people that you could grow your impact and grow your awareness with?
Yeah. And can I just say, hi, Chris Gill, better late than never. There's been some really good content on this podcast.
You need to rewind, Chris, back to the beginning and watch it.
You do.
Sean, you said you spend all day Monday creating the content for the week. I presume you're working 5 days a week, not 6 or 7. So at 5 days a week, that's 20% of your time. And you have no idea what the projected output would be. You can't have a sales forecast based on, well, I wrote content and it works for you.
Yeah. So just to crystallize that, right, with iRad being a tutorial building tool, content is our world, right? So we have a tool to build content. So it's not all just LinkedIn posts. A lot of it is additional internal content that we use for sharing with partners or preloaded templates that we're going to put somewhere. We came out with a video feature that like Loon that you can overlay on our tutorials, right? So now I can have my expertise walking you through a process in your CRM or in, some other tool. And so I spend time making that content. A lot of that gets repurposed onto social, but it's more about the time of taking and building those non-asked outputs so I can have this arsenal of tools that I know when someone comes to me, I'm like, give me 12 seconds and I can send them a link to something useful that I made, right? And that is why I spend all that time doing it. I put a lot of that publicly out there, which, does well and we get connections and all that sort of stuff. But for me, it's just having all of that expertise in this consumable fashion, because I can give that away to partners, give that away on sales calls, repurpose that online. So it's kind of a cumulative content approach. It's not strictly just for all of my posts, although that is, one of the big pieces I focus on.
That's
awesome. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we could go on with lots of additional questions, but we are reaching the top of the hour. So even if the conversation continued, LinkedIn would cut us off. So I did want to take a moment to thank the audience for their contribution to the show. Sean, if they wanted to reach you, how could they find you?
You can cold call. I mean, sorry, no. LinkedIn's the best place. Yeah, if you try to put content out there, support amazing people like the panel here. So I thank you guys for the time, and LinkedIn's a
You're
great
welcome,
place to
Sean.
connect and support each other.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Cheers.
It was great having you on the show.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.